Hello, my name is Simone Polillo. I am a sociologist at the University of Virginia, and in this short video, I'll talk a little bit about my article, Crisis, Reputation, and the Politics of Expertise, Fictional Performativity at the Bank of Italy, which recently appeared in the Review of Social Economy. Let me start briefly by summarizing my paper and highlighting the key contributions. This is a paper that looks at the evolution of the Bank of Italy's discourse and communicative practices over a period that goes roughly from the 1960s, the mid 1960s, through the end of the 1980s. It's an intervention into an ongoing debate in the sociology of knowledge, a debate that some economists have contributed to as well, about what central banks try to accomplish when they talk to a broad audience about their assessment of the economy. Sociologists were focused on statements, reports, press releases, and so on by monetary authorities are interested in the broader narratives contained in those documents. They argue that by telling stories about how the economy will look like in the future, banks, central banks, or monetary authorities more generally can help economic actors, including lay people, to better deal with future uncertainty. Stories can give a sense of purpose and direction, and so they're kind of like fictions that shape people's expectations about the future. Other sociologists have pushed back against the idea that narratives by themselves can shape economic behavior, even when it is a powerful agency like a central bank that tells a story. They agree that we need to explain how people view the economy, that is indeed an important issue to investigate, but they argue that the economy becomes meaningful to people through a wider range of techniques and interventions, including economic theories themselves. So to me, the Bank of Italy is a very strategic case for the study of these different dynamics. My analysis showed that it is not so much a question of techniques versus stories, but rather that the two are complementary, and that a monetary authority will rely upon techniques and stories to the extent that it is feasible to do so in a given political and economic context. In the post-war period, in the Italian case, for instance, the Bank of Italy put great efforts into developing sophisticated techniques of economic analysis, including an econometric model of the Italian economy. But Guido Carli, the governor who oversaw this development in the 1960s, always emphasized the more political role played by the bank, and so did future governors as well. Carly didn't do this only to foreground the bank's active participation in the setting of industrial policy. It did it also because the broader technical infrastructure that supported the economy in Italy was not sufficiently developed. The bank, for instance, did not have control of interest rates, which was set by the Treasury, and the stock exchange, in the more bank-oriented Italian economic model, was not deep enough to make space for the bank's interventions either. In the article, I show that one particularly important narrative that the bank relied on was a narrative of crisis. Through the 1960s, the Bank of Italy looked at the past with worry, specifically, the immediate post-Second World War period, and called for new measures that would prevent the country from falling back into it. Crisis was a threat that belonged to the past, but that could potentially return in the present as well. By the 1970s, however, the term crisis had entered public discourse, and the bank would repeatedly use this to characterize the broader economic world. The temporal focus to which crisis referred has shifted. The crisis of an increasingly distant past was now replaced by a new wave of instability originating in the international monetary system and quickly affecting the national economy as well. The 1970s were a decade of crisis in progress. In the 80s, with crisis once again seemingly at least a thing of the past, the bank persists in referring to economic crisis as an ever-present danger against which new economic policies must be crafted carefully. Through a computer-assisted analysis of the annual reports of the Bank of Italy and all the articles that two national newspapers wrote around the time of the release of those reports, I showed that this theme of crisis was a resonant one, setting the framework within which economic debate would unfold. So, what does this matter? I think kind of one important theme here is that we usually think of crisis as a descriptive term. There is a crisis in the economy, and the term refers to it. But its persistent and its varying orientation over time, in the Italian case at least, suggests to me that crisis can become a tool of governance. The present can be fictionalized to create a contrast with the more desirable future to which the present is an exception, or the future can be depicted as uncertain so as to promote a return to the past, or a celebration of the present itself, where the problems of the future are not as threatening as they could be if the future was allowed to happen. Crisis then becomes something like a form of regulation. Certain expectations about the future become more forceful than others, and they generate a politics of expectations where a time, the present, the past, or the future, is constructed as something to be protected from the problems of another time. Basically, what this article does is it ties together accounts that focus on expectations with accounts focus on the power of technical devices by proposing the new concept of fictional performativity. Fictional performativity, I argue, is the power of stories to do the work usually performed by techniques, and it obtains when the authors of those stories, through a rhetoric of urgency, make some technical solutions to the problems they highlight seem integral to a more prosperous future. Where next? Where can we take a project like this? There are several avenues where this research could develop, but for the sake of brevity and also to speak to a more interdisciplinary audience, I think the most interesting aspect of this work that could be expanded would be by widening its focus from the sociology of knowledge and expectations to the economics of rationality, expectations, and communication. I think that for a long time, sociology and economics have developed along parallel lines, and there is much potential for cross-fertilization in this area, especially when the topic of communicating important things about the economy is seen both from a sociological and economic perspective. I hope you enjoyed this, and I very much hope that you read the article, and please let me know what you think. Thank you.